Hello and welcome to the Thursday, January 23rd, 2025 edition of the SANS Internet Storm Center's Stormcast. My name is Johannes Ulrich and today I'm recording from Jacksonville, Florida. In diaries today, I wrote up a little bit an odd network protocol, PFSync. PFSync comes out of the OpenBSD project, and it's used in order to synchronize the state between a primary and a secondary firewall in order to allow for failover. What this means is that whenever there is a new session being established using the primary firewall, that is communicated to the secondary firewall via this PFSync protocol. Now, what makes it a little bit an odd protocol, it is not sort of part of the normal IETF standard process. There is no RFC for it. It uses the protocol number 240, which actually is just as unused in the IANA list of protocols. So there are not a ton of tools to really analyze these packets. Wireshark, for example, is at least the version I use, which is a recent version, did not recognize this protocol. With TCPDump, it's a little bit hit and miss depending on what version of TCPDump you're running. The version of TCPDump usually coming with BSD are actually able to analyze PFSync, while others, mine for example here on the Mac, it's a little bit an odd version anyway on the Mac, does not analyze PFSync. The protocol is, however, interesting because it does include a lot of network information. So from an offensive and defensive point of view, there's a lot of information that you can learn from PFSync packets. From a defense point of view, you also want to make sure that PFSync is using a dedicated link between the two firewalls, just not to leak that data, but also the amount of traffic can actually be somewhat substantial, just because if you think about it, for every new session, for every discontinued session and such, you do have a bunch of packets being sent forth and back here. So that certainly could impact network performance. Anyway, if you're interested in more of a deep dive of a PFSync, I certainly could do sort of a Packet Tuesday style video on this. But in this diary, I just sort of want to put out some pointers for to learn more about this protocol and give you a rough idea how it works and what it does. And Oracle today released its quarterly critical patch update. This particular update fixed 318 different vulnerabilities. Before you are too excited about the large number, remember again the vast product portfolio that's being covered by this update. There are a number of critical vulnerabilities, MySQL, WebLogic, Oracle Financial Services. All of these products are being affected by this update. Two of the critical ones I sort of want to point out. One is in the Kerberos component of the communication, billing, and revenue management. It hints a little bit at a remote code execution vulnerability here. It just says a memory management problem, but definitely remote exploitable. And even if it's not a remote code execution vulnerability, Kerberos and its role for authentication, of course, is always something to pay attention to. And then we have another remote code execution vulnerability that is exploitable over the network, and that's in the communication diameter signaling router. Not really sure where this is being used in the Oracle ecosystem. There's, again, so many components here. Can't really cover them all. But if you're using anything Oracle, please take a look at these patches and then try to figure out what you need to patch. An anti-malware company, ESET, came across an interesting supply chain attack against a South Korean VPN provider. The VPN provider is ipany.kr for Korea, and an installer that was distributed via the ipany.kr website was backdoored, and in addition to the legitimate software, also installed malware. The malware itself is your generic remote admin tool. It essentially backdoors a system it's being installed on. Now, given that the attacker here was able to deliver the malware from the official website, there's of course always a possibility that this particular company was breached more thoroughly, and this is just sort of one of the symptoms of the breach. Whenever you connect to a VPN provider, you of course need to configure your system in order to connect to the right endpoint with the right protocols. And given that this is often reasonably complex, many VPN providers do deliver some simple software that can be used to assist in this configuration. And that's essentially what this software is supposed to do. What makes it particularly tricky is that the configuration of VPNs does often require elevated privileges. So it wouldn't really be that unusual for software like this to, for example, ask the user for extra permissions, and the user then is more likely going to agree to this. Very serious compromise. The particular VPN provider is mostly targeting Korean users, so I don't think a lot of users outside of Korea did actually use this particular provider, and as a result did not necessarily fall for it. But as always, be aware what software you download, and in some cases, if there is a possibility that you don't need the software, where you just manually configure the VPN settings, maybe that's preferred over installing yet another package with lots and lots of dependencies. And then with all the talk about vulnerabilities related to Ivanti products, CISA, the Cyber Defense Agency, has released a write-up with details regarding some of the attacks they have actually seen against Ivanti cloud service applications, how different vulnerabilities, for example, were chained by threat actors. If you were affected by any of these compromises, or if you had vulnerable products and want to double check that they're not compromised, this is certainly a good document for you to review. The link, as always, in the show notes. Well, and that's it for today. Thanks for listening, and thanks for everybody providing feedback. Also, if you do have a minute to spare, please rate the podcast in your favorite podcast app, subscribe, and yes, any reviews and such, always welcome. Thanks, and talk to you again tomorrow. Bye.